Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Data Badger Show. I'm Andrew Kent, the Data Badger. As you may know, I started this show to help create community across e-discovery, litigation support, and legal ops. I feel like so many people are hungry for a better sense of community and feel left out, so I wanted to use this show as a vehicle to introduce some people I've known for quite a while to you guys, as well as use it as an excuse to meet some new great people. My guest today is someone I've known for about 21 years. 21 years or so ago now, we started working together back in the district. We were both young and well, young is the best way to put it. Fresh to the world, let's say. We've learned a lot since then, and I'm really happy that Josh shares it with us. Josh Tolles is a Senior Director of Tailored Solutions and Managed Services at Epic. He digs really deep into leadership, and I'm so happy about that because leadership has always been something near and dear to my heart. The idea that you can lead a team on to greater things. It's what makes me excited in the morning to get up and get going for things. So again, if you haven't met him, reach out after this video. I think you will really enjoy it. And be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well as to our channel here on LinkedIn. Thank you, everybody.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fourth installment of the Data Badger Show. I'm here with Josh Tolles. He is a Senior Director of Tailored Solutions at Epic, and of course, the pride of Seton Hall University School of Law. I've known you for almost 20 years now. We started working together a long time ago in a very, very different world. Why don't you go ahead, run us through what is it you do at Epic?
Yeah, and I reflect back often on our starting of our journey. And most of the time when I see your name, it reminds me of going back that 20 years, and it's pretty incredible where we both have ended up so far after all that. But yeah, at Epic, I run a small division or group within managed services. Managed services at Epic is essentially the Iris acquisition. So back in 2014-ish, I think, or 2015, DTI acquired Iris for primarily for some managed services clients they had. I think about 50 at the time. That business has continued to grow. And as it has, a certain subset of clients have inquired about a different level of service, something much more white glove and sort of breaking the mold. So I currently have 3 clients, and the goal for the most part for those is to establish a service level that is just hard to replicate at scale. So it's almost like we've gone backwards, right? We had all the small vendors, they grew into the Concilios, the Epics, whatever's of the world. They operationalized everything, and it became sort of impersonal, and a lot of tickets and queues and things. And so now we've kind of swung back the other way, at least in my world at the moment, to create a bespoke team of people who focus specifically on those clients to give them that attention and that feeling that they had back in the day, but with the support behind us of a company the size of Epic. So that's what we do day in, day out. Law firm clients only at this point. And it's honestly some of the best clients I've had in my entire career, not to shade anyone else, but the relationships are really good, really strong. The partnerships are good. And the team is really high functioning at this point, which is also great.
Yeah, it's that old saying, right? Small companies need to look big to be successful. Big companies need to feel small to be successful.
Yeah. And I've run the whole gamut. I was at Altep back in 2014 when it was 200 people, and all the way through the Concilio acquisition when it was, a few thousand. And you watch people come and go because they wanted to be really hands-on. They wanted to help clients, but guardrails were put in place that said you can't do that. If you're working at a company like this, if you're a PM, you can't run threading, you can't do these things that they love to do. And again, so that made sense at the time to me, but it also makes sense that we've kind of swung back the other way for a select group of clients who want that level of service and who are willing to invest in it. So.
Absolutely. And there is a certain point where it does feel very much like a factory, and you don't get to do all the stuff that you like to do or interact with those clients. So much of it's about engagement and really starting to understand your clients and what they like, what they want to do.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that was probably the most eye-opening thing about the people at Epic in the managed services group when I began to work with them is they wanted to succeed, right? They wanted to provide it, but they also understood that they were purpose built for something different. And so when I arrived, I wasn't sure what to expect, but it was clear that they wanted the clients to be really happy. They just understood that something different was required. And so they commissioned a different approach, which I think is great. And it definitely felt strange because it's such a small thing. It felt kind of fragile. It really depends on how things go. But a year and a half into it, the relationships are just in an incredible place, really satisfying, and really authentic. Right, like the conversations with people on the client side, on the internal team side. There's a lot of trust, a lot of safety, but also great service. So
Absolutely. And I know both you and I, culture and leadership is important. I think uh, we've seen the range on that in the places we've been. I know you've been trying to get me to watch The Bear, and I haven't quite done it yet. I will at some point. The real reason I'm not watching it is because I'm such a Shameless fan. I hate to see that my favorite character change into a new character, but let me know, what kind of is it about The Bear and the leadership in there? Kind of give me the background. Give me the sales pitch.
yeah, so funny enough, the show almost falls into the category of I can't stand it because it's full of conflict and just excessive amounts of drama, which are not something, you talk about the culture of it. That's not something that I want to be around, right? And so even watching on TV at times is hard. But there is this sort of one. My wife and I watched the first season, and then we got in. We really struggled through it. We got into the second season. We kind of swore it off for a few months, and then we hit a few episodes into it. And there's just this one scene that I've even posted on LinkedIn as just my sort of my daily inspiration. And it's one of the characters. His name is Richie. He's very jaded. He's very pessimistic about everything. He's been in a business for a long time and just doesn't see the light anymore. Doesn't really see the purpose, and so they send him off to work at this 5-star Michelin restaurant, some number of stars, and they have him doing the most menial tasks. Yeah, go ahead. And the particular task is polishing forks. And so he's doing a really crappy job at it. And this guy who works at the restaurant full time says, let's go out in the alley. We need to have a conversation. And he takes him out there and he lectures him about the purpose of what they're doing and why it matters so much. And it's while there's a lot of conflict and other non-inspirational stuff on the show, and they wrote a whole long story about this episode and how it was created because it was so special. Different writers have written a lot about it, but he explains, right, the details are what matter, right? And so if you're not polishing the forks, you're probably not preparing the food correct. You're probably not doing all the other things correct that make it, in the words of the scene, the Super Bowl every freaking day, right? That's how the guy, when he's kind of lecturing about it, he describes it to him. And so it's the beginning of this transformation of this character who becomes the most inspirational character on the show. He was the most annoying character to start, and he becomes quickly after the most inspirational because he understands what a Michelin star restaurant service level looks like. And to me, I show that clip to my team. We had a team summit in September. It was the first thing we showed them when we got in the room, and then we asked them, each of them, what did they think about it? And then there's a couple more scenes where you get to see him evolve into that service obsessed professional. And the greatest part of it is he takes so much joy in it. When he realizes it and he gets the purpose and he now has a reason to be great, he flourishes and he's so satisfied. So it's a TV show, but honestly, it's one of the cooler manifestations of that sort of lesson I've seen in a really long time. So I've probably watched that clip 200 times, that 2-minute clip.
Interesting. And of course, that's the classic brown M&M Van Halen story, right? In their rider, they have only brown M&Ms because it indicates to them if you can't get the M&M right, you probably also don't have the wiring right for all of our equipment.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly right. I shared that story with them shortly after when we returned, I think, or maybe while we were on the same summit. I made reference to it during a conversation, and people had no idea, right? Because I'm old. You're a little bit older as well, and a lot of the folks on our team, or at least a few of the folks on our team, are a little bit younger, so they didn't understand. So I found printed out a PDF article about it and shared it with them, because that's like, as you said, the details really matter. And you mentioned the cultural dynamic, leadership. To me, that's the definition or the difference between success and failure, is always staying focused on those details, even when it gets really busy. And I'm sure there's a point where it becomes much more difficult, but I just don't think you can be successful in that way without it. So that's what we talk about day in and day out in the Tailored Solutions group, is how do we make the finer details really stand out, right? It builds trust, it builds confidence with your clients, and that's what we're here for, right? We're trying to get more responsibility, more work, more everything. That only comes if they really trust you. So
Absolutely. I'm just over here reeling. It is true these days, Van Halen has become classic rock, and it does date us a little bit. So
yes,
yeah, so I guess I have to need to go to the Bear and stop talking about Van Halen. They only know Sammy Hagar at best, Van Halen. So
yeah, yeah. No, we're lots of things are getting older, Andrew. You and I both among them. So
I went to the doctor last month, and I was expecting him to blame all of my problems on being fat, which I was, fine with. He blamed them all on me being old. He's like, "Yeah, you're just getting old," and I wasn't ready for that. I
yeah,
was ready for you to be like, lose some weight, walk some more. I wasn't ready for you to be like, give up, you're old. This is just how it's going to be.
yeah.
So
No,
it takes to.
when you get to a certain age and you go to the doctor and you tell them your elbow hurts, they just tell you, right, that's what being 50 something is like. Stuff just hurts. So
Here's your walk. And
yeah,
I was a few months ago, I was in a restaurant and I looked up at the sign. It said, you had to be born by this date to drink alcohol. And I graduated law school before that. I think my law school degree could buy alcohol at the restaurant. Oh,
yeah,
I'm gonna have the big one. But yeah, I'm always a big fan of culture. Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Mhm.
What else are you telling your team to get them on point with your message?
A great question. I mean, it all starts with trust, right? We focus on that day in and day out. There's a lot of trust. Trust is a metaphor for a lot of things when it comes to explaining why we do something as a business, but I think it's a really easy thing to grasp, and it resonates well with people that we're trying to build that trust. Um, we're a cross-functional group, which is really interesting. We do all the work. We do with one of the teams. I have a couple, but with one of them, we do all the work. We do the productions, we do the processing, we do the consultation, we do everything all the way throughout. Each person has to be capable of doing all those things, which is really great. And for the client to have a great time, they have to be willing to take risks, right? Because to develop from when you put a team together like that, usually you have ops people and you have CS people, and you grab the ones that you think fit the puzzle well. But the goal is to break out of those molds and to create a different level of service and leadership. And so I guess that's probably the best answer to your question. When we talk about creating great culture and great service, it starts with leadership and their mindset, right? There's this myth, or there's this myth or false expectation that people provide the culture of leadership, and that you just get to be part of it and you get to enjoy the benefits of it as a team member. I think that's the biggest lie that's been ever told, especially in e-discovery. You can go out, you can search, you can jump, you can job hop, you can do everything looking for that thing. But until you decide that you want to be part of creating it and nurturing it, you won't have it very long, right? And so on the last several stops that I've had, which there've been a lot, that's been the foundation of great services. Think like a leader, because it's not a manager, right? You should never be a manager if you don't think like a leader, and you can be a manager if you think like a leader, right? So that's probably the biggest topic of conversation day in and day out is, you got to be a leader. That requires that you are willing and able to grow, to learn, which requires that you're willing and able to be uncomfortable a lot, right? And try unfamiliar things. So we spent a lot of the first part of my time with this team focused on that. And that's helped them grow into cross-functional. It's helped them grow into more consultative. I think with the scale at some of these companies that we've grown into, people become very comfortable in their lane. As we said, that sort of operationalization, and getting them out of that mindset is challenging. But for me, I think it's for them, it's their best chance of success. If they really want to achieve success, you have to be willing to do all that stuff.
Absolutely. Throw out for me core values, yours or the company.
Sorry, you want the core values of me or the company?
Either one.
Yeah, Epic has a number of core values. I think 5 in total, and they're great. They do align with what we talk about, but I sort of insist on my own set. Um, we're sort of rethinking that design a little bit in the second full year of the program. And again, we've settled on trust as sort of the core theme or value, building trust. But for me, authenticity is a huge one. Curiosity, which supports what we were just talking about, right? You have to be curious, and to be curious, you have to be willing to ask questions, take risks. An environment of safety, but empowerment, I guess would be how I would describe it. We as leaders have to create a safe environment so those people can take those risks. You don't want someone to fall on their face in front of a client if you can avoid it, right? So creating and manufacturing opportunities for people to take risks without putting them out in the spotlight and off the edge of a cliff. So, trust, safety, authenticity is huge for me as a person. An individual person is probably the most important thing in terms of the values that I look for in people that I work with, and sort of just in general. Curiosity was another one, and maybe there's a fifth one out there. We had a whole sheet of them that we used to walk through and talk about, but it's been a little bit since I looked at it. So yeah, those are among them. If I think of any others, I'll toss them out there. But yeah, the company core values are about inclusivity, all the things about belonging and bringing your best self, being candid, being honest, being, a good human to work with. And those have also served us very well. So
yeah, I love the part about asking questions. I've interviewed so many people, having hired a lot of people over the years. And one of the big things is getting it across to them that it takes confidence to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Not asking questions, faking it. That's not confidence. That's going to hurt us.
Yeah.
Having real confidence, being able to say, hey, I have a question. I want to know the answer. So that's a good thing.
Right. Yeah. And that's, we talked about leadership and culture, and by design, that's incredibly important, right? When you ask the team to develop some sort of training and teach the other team members, it's not that there's a reason, right? And that reason is, again, building that confidence or something similar, right? So they can have both the safety of and the belonging with their team members, where they have that relationship, where they trust each other, they respect each other, but also them being the one to get out in front of everybody and talk, and then people in the audience asking questions. I've been on countless trainings at every place I've ever been where no one ever asks anything, and you just know that is not a successful training. It's a completed training. You can check a box, but did anybody actually take anything away from it? It's really hard to know. And so, right, we try to liven up the conversation. We challenge people to put themselves out there, especially in front of the team. This year, in front of the client, to do trainings and things, because that's just part of that confidence you have to be able to ask the questions. I mean, you probably went through it too with college and law school and everything, where you just have to decide, I don't care what anybody thinks, I'm going to ask. When sometimes you ask, even if you think because you expect somebody next to you might not know, and you want to be helpful in that regard. But so many people look at that as a sign of weakness. So it's weird.
Absolutely. I was leading a team once, a team that had been there a long time at the place, and they were great. If you asked them to do work, they would absolutely do the work. They would knock it out of the park. But if you asked them to talk with the team about how they were doing it or come up with any training, they scattered immediately. Like, no, I can't do it. And it's like, no. We have to come to the table and explain how each of us are doing it, because they were all doing it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And have that discussion on, what is going to be right or wrong. And it's not an attack session. This is not, oh, we caught you. You did something the way we don't want it to. No, this is let's bring it to the table, discuss it, and then come together in terms of what we're going to do going forward, getting that FBA, that follow by all there.
Yep.
And it took months of creating that safe space and being like, see, you can do it. Bring these things. Right. Doing those weekly meetings where we hunt down those issues and try to resolve them. You had to really be like, come on, guys, I need you to come out of your shell and have that transparency, because building a wall around it and saying, no, 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 I'm afraid to show anybody. Like, no, that doesn't work. We have to be open. We have to move things forward.
Yeah, and then the safety aspect of that is it's non-negotiable, right? That is so important, and it's something that gets so often overlooked, and we see the symptoms of it in so many different companies that you or I have probably worked in, where there's just people don't have the comfort or confidence, whatever other words we want to think of, to speak up, and so you can't have a culture of curiosity. And to me, you just can't be great at service unless you're curious, because you to be great, you have to be willing to tackle problems that haven't been tackled, or you're not following a list of steps. That's one of the big things we've talked about in our team over and over, which it became really apparent probably 7 to 10 months ago. When things go wrong, you don't focus on the symptom. You don't make a rule to fix that particular problem. You focus on the habits and behaviors that we have as a team that allow us to be more successful in those areas. And so many times and we were guilty of doing it too at the time, creating rules for symptoms and not focusing on diseases, right? And so eventually we had this really great candid conversation where it was just like, there are too many rules. We can't remember them. Our brain sponge is getting too full, and then we have to throw some rules out to take on the new rules. And then we just said, whoa, you're absolutely right. What are we doing? Habits and behaviors. Let's focus on that instead. And it just takes a load off people's mind to think that I don't have to remember exactly the rule that you're talking about, but I need to take away sort of the behavioral message of what we're talking about. So yeah, even as someone who wants to be a great leader and be a great manager for a team, and for my org, fell into that trap, probably about a year ago at this point, a little less than a year ago. So that was a great reminder to focus on those things, because that's all that's really sustainable. You can have checklists, you can have processes, you can have procedures, but people can only retain so much. And what really matters is the habits and behaviors that lead to success. Discipline, that's another core value for us, is discipline, because even if you don't want to do it, even if it's not glamorous or fun, if it really matters to the success of the client, you have to do it. So that was definitely on our list. Yeah. You just said like 10 different other things too that had my mind going all these different directions. I will come back to those as they reappear. One thing that I think you alluded to, or maybe I'm just imagining it, was so one of my duties at Epic is quality. I play a substantial role in the quality program for our EMS group, and that's been a really fascinating experience, because that also deals a lot with the safety and the belonging, where when something goes wrong, doesn't matter who did it. It doesn't, that we're not here to blame somebody. We're trying to learn from it. And I think everyone had that same goal, and we've kind of we've worked our way through it. But the challenge, for different teams when you're in that dynamic, is it's somebody on a different team, or it's a person next to you. And if you have to put a name on it, which you do, because we have to know who to talk to get the details, and to potentially help that particular person, not just the process. A really interesting social experiment. And what we found in the past several months is we focused on the safety and belonging. So we drew a bright line that says, if an error makes it to a client, that's bad, period. If an error is found internally, that's actually a celebration, because now we've identified something we can all learn from. And our team is a little bit smaller, so we tend to experiment with things. And we looked over the last 2 years at the quality data from our team, and as the work went up, the quality errors would go up, the client errors would go up, and it would just ping pong back and forth. And then sometime in October, we said, okay, we're going to report as many things as we can find internally without any kind of prejudice or anything. We're actually going to celebrate it. And for the first time in the last 2 years, the number of internal errors went way up, and the number of client errors stayed down. But that requires that everyone feels safe, that they're not being judged, that there is a promise that no one gets fired for an internal quality error, right? Or that sounds harsh, and hopefully not for any error, but certainly not for over-identifying quality problems internally, because they're either process or knowledge gaps. That's been a really fun part of the adventure too, and it's been a lot of there's been a lot of leadership thought going into it from among the many individuals who are part of that initiative, and it's been really rewarding so far.
And that's always so key, the seeing the symptoms versus the disease when you're coming up with what the issue is, defining that issue, really understanding, the beginning of it. There's a little thought exercise I like to throw out in some of the quarterly priority meetings I have about red balls and white balls. It's not new by any means, but you're in a room, there's a conveyor belt that comes in, it's got red balls and white balls. You make up whatever distinguishing characteristic you want in terms of size, floatability, weight, whatever you want to do. And then you say, okay, well, how do we separate the red balls from the white balls? Everyone comes up with all sorts of ideas. The real answer, though, is going to be going next door and finding out why the red balls and white balls are together. We're fixing something at the end of it.
Yeah.
And we walk back to the process, because in the next room, there might be some guy who has a bucket of red balls, a bucket of white balls. He's dumped them together because he doesn't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Having that hyper communication throughout the system to actually find, like you said, find that disease and not the symptom on it.
And man, and just the thing that you just said in there that really got me was because he doesn't know what we're doing. And as I said, when we get to this certain level of scale, people lose sight of what's actually happening after they're done with their widget, right? I made my widget, I passed it on. There's not that curiosity. There's an order taking mentality. And that reminded me of one of the other things too. 10 years ago, just say that if I forget what it was when I'm finished with this thought. But that's a really obvious thing, right? Groups become really focused on what they do. They become focused on their efficiency. They unintentionally lose focus on what's actually happening with the bigger picture. And to me, I had this analogy that I used to talk about a couple of years back, and it was trying to get everybody to understand what great service is. And it was dealing with a particular issue. But, if a client calls you and says, hey, I need you to jump in a school bus and bring you and your whole team across country and meet me on Sunday at 5 p.m. in San Diego at this address, it makes no sense for the PM who for that particular request to tell everybody to get on the bus and then just start driving. But that's kind of what happens, right? They're the one who know the big picture, but they're usually dispatching pieces of it to different groups to do their piece. And the killer there, in my mind, is you miss out on all of the expertise that those people have about past requests, past problems, because they're just going to fulfill the thing that you asked them to do, because there is no involvement. There's no ops leadership telling the PM, well, there's a major road construction on this way. You're going to want to go this way. It'll save you 4 hours, whatever, right? And as a result, because there's not that transparency or clarity around the entire request and everyone's focused on their piece, we can't really tell the client when we're going to be there, what day, what time. Did we forget 3 people in the bathroom at the gas station? We don't, all these things go wrong because only one person really knows the full mission. And so for a couple of years now, that's been a focus too, is like, how do we get more focus on the entire thing, not just the widget? And that goes back to the operational challenges that come about the challenges come out when you operationalize something so well, is it's difficult to have a complete view of what's happening. And it's honestly difficult because of the workload to want to, right? And so rewarding that curiosity, rewarding that consultation, and taking advantage of it, I think is something that we have to get better at in this business at this scale, right? And the 10 years ago thing, you'll agree. Someone said this, and I can't unsee it once I heard it and thought about it. If you go back to 2014, and you look at the people that you knew and met, tons of certifications, tons of test taking, very accomplished relativity masters. If you go back to 2004, when we met, it's very different. Solving problems was really complicated in the sense that there was no clear best practice. There was no clear favorite tool. Relativity was, taking that shape in 2008, 9, 10-ish, but we were working with different tools, you and me, sitting side by side, or I think you sat in front of me and I sat behind you in our Williams and Conley cubicles. We would be working in different discovery platforms throughout the day because they were case specific, right? One case had this, One case had that. And when a problem came up, it wasn't, what does the relativity handbook say? It was, what do we do to solve this problem at a more um, programmatic level, right? So like we think about the tools that we have in front of us and we assemble those. And so when somebody pointed out the difference between 20 years of e-discovery experience and 10 years, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I was like, wow, that is so true because things have become so standardized. And you and I, a lot of other people have been doing it a bit longer, which we don't want to date ourselves, but there's a certain level of confidence, risk taking that led to whatever success we've had because we didn't have a blueprint, we didn't have a handbook, and we just had to figure stuff out. That was just the way, right? So that's another thing we talk about leadership wise too, is it's all intertwined, right? You can't always know, and that's fine. You have to have the confidence you talked about earlier to ask as many questions as you can, trust your judgment, all those things. And all that is just to create a team of super empowered people who will go out and make clients incredibly happy by doing whatever's necessary. So
I always push the 3 E's: empowerment, engagement, and empathy. That's how we build strong culture to move forward. And it's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, we definitely worked with a lot of tools back then and a lot of computer programs as well. And we were always fighting the symptoms because you weren't trying to come up with a greater theory on how to do things. It was always specific to that one specific platform you had,
right,
which you would work on, like I said, for that one attorney, and then the next attorney would have the other platform. And they were so many little ineffective platforms that you were always just trying to figure out, all the clicks.
yeah, I think over time though that served us well, right? Because we were able to create confidence in our judgment. It wasn't specific to one tool, it was just battle tested. And that's kind of the thing with the 10-year difference. Everyone's so entrenched in different tools at this point that the common tools, that at the mention of something outside of that tends to shake people up a bit.
Yeah.
And that's a conversation I've had with the team a lot too, is has there been a day, and I'm curious to hear your story. My story, I can remember the day and the time, but when someone said, we need you to do this, and everyone in the room is there's maybe 4 people in a room and you're all looking at each other and you're like, we don't have any idea what we're going to do here. And then everybody just kind of goes, but we trust that we're smart enough to figure it out and we have enough experience. I remember that day vividly. And I think for people to be successful, really successful professionally, they have to have that moment where they just admit, I don't know, but I trust that it's going to be okay because I trust my judgment, I trust my commitment, my ownership. I trust my empathy and understanding with what the client is going to need and ask for, even if they're going to be mad at times because it's a huge, crazy thing and might not go all that well. Do you have a moment like that in your mind that you remember?
Well, I think that, just as a broader item, is part of a lot of our origin stories. People say, how did you get into e-discovery? At the time, e-discovery was a place where problem solvers, people who could think through problems in a repetitive way, in a repeatable way, I guess I should say, were really in need. And so at first it was a lot of, I don't want to say game, but it really was a bit of a puzzle or riddle on how do you start solving all the problems and moving things forward.
Yeah.
It wasn't, like you say, it wasn't these certifications in programs. It was your wits and your thinking through how to solve problems, how to make those workflows. Going back to the bear, I had grown up in kitchens, and in doing that, I'd really learned a lot of the ergonomics of how to do things, how to set up a line, how to come up with a menu, all those things that seemed completely unconnected, but they really worked well in the setting we had. And, again, in a kitchen, you constantly had people coming and going, leaving, training new people. That organism was constantly changing, just like it was back in the contract review world.
Yeah. Oh, the contract review world. Yeah. But I think you're right. It's a problem solving mentality, right? And understanding that there's a system or something behind almost everything. And to your point earlier, you just got to go into the other room and take a look, and be willing to go look under the hood of what that is. Because as you said, I think, again, that's a really powerful note, is sometimes the person who's feeding you the stuff has no idea what you're doing with it. And until that's solved, you're just wasting your time trying to keep up with everything else. There will be more red and white balls than you could ever possibly manage at some point. if
Yeah.
things are going well, because that's the goal. If you think about that like business or customers or anything, that's what you want and that's what you're aiming for. And that is one of the most fatal flaws in e-discovery, right? Is everyone just keeps thinking like if I just can keep up, but the goal is never to keep up. The goal is to get ahead, be so efficient and be so, process oriented and well designed that you're ready for more work, which eventually you run out of humans. You just don't have enough humans. If the headcount gets incredibly expensive, and honestly, the talent is just hard to find sometimes. So yeah, it's interesting.
And daily work just gets you to tomorrow. Moving forward is all about that quarterly work, coming up with that big plan, coming up with those big ideas, getting them down into pieces and be able to make progress. You mentioned when was that time where that light bulb hit me in terms of doing that. I really think the pandemic had a lot to do with that. The pandemic hit, and I just become COO of a small legal services company, small when I started.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay, well, what do we do now? We can't knock on doors. We can't go to places. So Reed Wallace and I came up with a online conference and did it for 2 years in a row. It was really great, quite frankly. It brought a lot of great people to the table.
Yeah.
And we had nothing to go on. We were writing it all as we went along, how to make an online conference in those days. Now everybody does it. At the time, it was somewhat unheard of.
Yeah.
I was reaching out to church pastors. A lot of church pastors had online programs. So I was reaching out to church pastors, calling them up, asking them how they were doing things. And we were able to build things, not by a certification or an instruction manual, but by two people who could really think logically and think it through.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big things I look back on. Reed and I accomplished so much in those 2 years. I wish we kept doing it. We had other things calling us, but we'd be on the 6th year by now. It'd be really impressive, let's say, by now. But I think the pandemic really put a lot of us problem solvers back in the hot seat in terms of, okay, drive the bus, let's go.
Right. Yeah, I remember the couple of years of you doing that. I remember seeing it. Yeah, definitely. It's there are so many things that are service oriented and service, based that you think there's too many analogies, too many metaphors, but there really aren't. You could use so many things to describe not only how to solve problems, but what we're trying to create for an experience as well for people, which often are really intertwined in so many different industries, or just, it's not even an industry, right? Like you're talking about a church pastor. I don't know what you call that. But it's definitely an experience, and they're trying to make it a great experience for people as well. And so they're trying to devise things to accommodate, adapt, whatever. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating. What else you got?
Well, like I said before, usually when we start getting into the conversation just rolls by. We're probably good to end it. Is there anything else you want to talk about? I know there is one topic. I'll give you a moment at the end. Anything else you want to discuss?
I think it's one thing that was coming to mind a minute ago while we were talking through a little bit of that, and I'll try to keep it brief, is the details, right? And one of the things that I think is incredibly important that gets a little bit lost too is the details of leadership. We as lead, it's not just the team, right, and the details of the work that they do, but one of the challenges is translating that, what you learn in that role, into a leader as well, and understanding the importance of mentoring and coaching your people. That's been my goal for the last several years, is to build little leadership factories that take in people who have an interest in it, and then put them in a position to become the next successful leaders wherever they go. I don't really care. I wish they would stay. I'd love to continue to work with them, but my goal is just for them to be successful and achieve whatever satisfaction they're aiming for. And so, at scale, when things get busy, people tend to forget about those details, and they let the work get in the way. I'm a huge proponent of being really disciplined about that too, as managers that I have that are on my team, them taking care of the people, the one-on-one conversations they have, all of that stuff, giving feedback, which is another hard thing for people. That's another thing we talk about all the time, that feedback, the safety, the trust we talked about earlier. So not only is the details matter in the service, the details matter in the management and leadership as well. And that getting forgotten because of scale or busyness is almost one of the worst things that can happen. because then people don't grow, right? And so that was the only other thing I was thinking about while we were talking about all that stuff. And the responsibility of that role is something that should be cherished. It's really important.
Absolutely. So the one final thing, your Patriots are in the Super Bowl once again. How does the game play out? How do you win?
Oh man, how does the game play out? I haven't even thought about that.
You can tell I live in Titans territory. I can't even say Super Bowl without trying.
Again, I don't know what to expect. My hope is that it's less of a sloppy game, because they have had some sloppy games with the weather, playing top tier defenses throughout, the last 3 games. They played 3 of the top 5 defenses in the league in the playoffs. I hope there's a little bit more offense in this game. I see a lot of people predicting it being high scoring, and I tend to fall that way, but it'll be close. The Seahawks are a fantastic team. I after that Thursday night game over the Rams, when it bounced off the guy's helmet and ends up getting picked up in the end zone, they win on a 2-point conversion. I said out loud to my wife, "This team is going to the Super Bowl." That was a championship DNA win. Like that, this team has what it takes. But again, I told you earlier, I've got my quiet confidence in my Patriots. They've been underestimated all season, and that's been just fine. They've also been very lucky the last couple of games. So I don't know how it's going to end, but I'm ready to watch it, and I definitely think it's going to be fun.
What's the final score?
I'm going to go 37-34. And of course, I'm predicting the Patriots will win. So it's going to end on a field goal. That's the theory. In keeping with many other Patriot wins, it'll end on a field goal in the Super Bowl. So
awesome. Well, thank you, Josh. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. Had a great time as always. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Andrew. It's been too long, so let's keep in touch.